Africa is a vast land blessed with an abundance of natural resources. Seams of minerals lay hidden in the ground. The land soaks up endless sunlight and contains rich soil. Africa produces some of the West's favorite goods such as cocoa, tungsten, lumber, and tin. Unfortunately, this immeasurable wealth of resources has been extracted and exploited from the African people. Foreign companies and countries such as the United States, Canada, and China, among others, control the trade of such goods. Usually, the goods are harvested in dangerous conditions, painstakingly refined, sorted, processed, and sold in the market for extremely low prices. The farmers and producers of the materials are forced to do their occupation due to necessity, not choice. They must feed their families. If not miners or farmers, citizens have resorted to prostitution in order to provide for their families. Sometimes, rebel, ethnic, and extremist groups have taken control of mines and markets in order to finance ammunition and weapons. Most children work in plantations or mines rather than attending school. Disease and mortality are widespread. The supply chain from the source to the first world consumer is convoluted and shady with suspicious deals and a lack of recorded transactions. In the last 15 years or so, investigations deep into the supply chain have revealed the horrors and human rights violations in Africa. These have been presented to the world, and foreign countries have a heightened awareness of the source of our favorite goods. Some resolutions have been passed by Western nations, including the United States. The Dodd-Frank Act, a law put forth in 2011, requires foreign companies to report the source of their minerals. An increasing amount of farmers, including cocoa farmers, decided to produce free trade certified products. Foreign extraction has posed challenges for material producers in Africa, but increasing awareness for production methods and sourcing may lead to a healthier, more prosperous African continent. So who are these evil puppet masters leading the charge in ravaging these impoverished countries? Well, for one, Party City. Other censorship names include Apple, Microsoft, and Ford. In fact, over 1,262 companies are directing efforts thereby using what experts call conflict minerals. These conflict minerals include tantalum, tungsten, tin, or gold mined from ore with emphasis on tin. These are often extracted from the Congo, Angola, Sudan, Rwanda, or many other poor countries which have been long desecrated by horrific civil wars resulting in thousands of instances of murder, rape, and child soldiers. These materials are used in almost everything in the average American's day to keep daily life. The tantalum allows Apple phones to keep their charge, whereas tungsten is a mineral at the core of an everyday light bulb. But why is this such a major issue? A few examples to point to. As we speak, the jungle of North Kivu is getting chopped down in the Lawless province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Those living in there can hear the trees getting chopped down every day, century-old trees being dug up by their roots. All of this led by Boris Kamstra, who is gleefully destroying this beautiful environment. He leads Alphamin Resources, a company funded by Canada. This company is responsible for a mine built in Bias, a mine roughly 60 kilometers away from any civilization and one of the biggest mines in all of Africa. In all fairness, before Kamastra, there were no real structure in the area. A hike could take days. However, this has been traded for multiple armed forces roaming nearby. Bias comes with a cost and risk from before anything has been mined. Mr. Kamastra has even claimed that the helicopters make confetti of $100 bills. That exploratory mining costs even more, roughly $250 for every meter. Despite this, the company has dug over 40,000 of these meters, if only to prove themselves to investors. Building any road isn't cheap, especially as many built are as long as 32 kilometers and can take up to 450 workers to create.
Despite the sheer
Amount of land dug out, until recently it had all been done by hand. Most mining procedures use manual labor over technology, with methods of materials similar to the 19th century California gold rush. However, Alphaman plans to demonstrate that he can operate an industrial mine in less than an overpowered part of the world. He's claimed that he finds the investment attractive as the ores he plans to extract that are some of the richest of all. Further from the camp on the hills are tons of cylinder rocks drilled out in order to mark all of the ores in the mountain. This ore is 4.5% grade, meaning that the firm will be able to sell 3.25 tons of tin for every 100 tons of ore extracted. To compare, some mines would be happy to produce 0.7 tons. Experts say that Camacho's mine could cost up to $1.35 billion, a sum that may be too insecure for a place like North Kivu. The firm has not been able to operate until 2012, despite getting the go-ahead from the government in 2006, due to the large amount of fighting. Ever since opening, there has been 4 attacks by armed groups. A police officer was even murdered in 2012, and his research work was wrecked. Research work worth hundreds of dollars. To counter this, the site now has over 30 police officers to protect itself. Despite the high return the alpha men may take, they run a risky line of dodging riots and protests against their company, and for a good reason. 15,000 people lived in Bias in 2007. They produce around 14,000 tons of tin a year, which equals 5% of world production. They would sell ore by carrying it on their heads to planes, which would fly the materials to other countries, a truly grueling work. This was not a practice exclusive to Bias. Despite this, it was quite profitable for those involved, which is why so many people chose to do the work. However, this was no longer an option in 2011 thanks to America. The Dodd-Frank Act, which was mostly aimed at banks, stated that firms who worked in the United States had to show where the minerals used in their products came from. This was intended to stop rebels from selling gold and diamonds for a profit, as well as to stop the previously mentioned tragedies. However, President Donald Trump's administration has proposed a rollback to the act. The act thus far has resulted in a particular source of income for impoverished Africans disappearing under their feet. However, with the help from the UN, certain bag and tag minerals are getting allowed to be mined. Bag and tag refers to a process of sourcing minerals by screening mines and labeling conflict-free minerals. Alpha Men's mine, if open, may employ some Africans but nowhere near the thousands who mined before. These mining practices has caused no shortage of social issues. For one, many of the mines create forced involuntary resettlement, which not only can physically affect the locals' lives, but can emotionally affect them as well. Indigenous people who have forged strong links with the environment are heartbroken over some of the acts. With many of these impoverished countries living from such a severe lack of government oversight, many officials have begun corrupt practices and many miners have dodged a lot of responsibility. Thus worse than all of this, however, is how much of the wealth isn't reaching local economies. While the mines do hire some Africans, many foreigners can take their job due to better qualifications. And what's worse is that much of the job becoming automatized as technology moves forward. These mining problems are by no means exclusive to the Congo. Somalia, for instance, has had a history of civil unrest which has recently turned into this type of mining. With plentiful deposits of feldspar, gypsum, iron ore, limestone, natural gas, quartz, silica sand, tin, and uranium, the mineral industry has had a major impact on Somalia's economy. Somalia still suffers under the lack of central government. In Mogadishu, most people living outside of the walls in either nomadic like tents or small huts along the road. In addition to minerals, agriculture has created issues for Africa. Especially in the West Africa, cotton and cocoa are grown, both of which are very popular commodities for foreigners. One major producer of cotton is Mali, where 40% of the rural population depends on cotton production. The cotton industry leaves many living in extreme poverty. One example of this is Musa Dunubia, a small cotton farmer in Mali. He toils hunched over picking cotton for 12 hours a day. He processes it in a manual fashion reminiscent of the old method involving a cotton gin. He sells his cotton on the market, selling 1 kilogram of material for 185 Central African francs, equating to about $250 US per year. He is hardly able to feed his 9 children. To make matters worse, American subsidies to homegrown cotton farmers have caused the entire global cotton market to be skewed. His community lives in poverty, and poverty breeds conflict. Schools are few or non-existent, and even if they were, families couldn't afford the tuition or materials. These issues have come to the light in some nations. Cocoa is also harvested in a large scale in West Africa, with over 70% of the world's cocoa coming from the region. The world has a particular affinity for chocolate. The cocoa tree only survives close to the equator, and it is difficult to harvest the pods from. The crop is susceptible to disease, pests, soil erosion, and exhaustion of soil nutrients, all of which pose problems to farmers. Cocoa pods do not all mature at the same time, so only select pods may be harvested. The process is very laborious and can be dangerous. A worker must climb the tree in some cases, use a machete to cut the pod off, split it, and scrape out the pulp containing the seeds, wrap the seeds in a plantain leaf, and leave it in the sun to ferment, and then tediously sort each bean based by its dryness. The beans are then packaged and shipped to foreign companies. The cocoa industry has caused many environmental concerns such as erosion, deforestation, and depletion of soil nutrients. Also, the industry leaves many in poverty. The workers can earn as little as 25 cents to 50 cents a day. Young children are forced to turn away from school and towards the cocoa farms, machete in hand. Recent investigations in the cocoa supply chain have revealed the use of child labor and the level of poverty. This has caused a push for free trade certified products, which is intended to provide financial security to third world farmers as well as investment in education. Africa's curse may be its plentiful resources, which has kept rebel armies in business. Many of the people in power focus on how to divvy up money profitably for them rather than fixing these issues. Most governments can make money from mining or agriculture and choose to rather than through proper management of the economy or clever taxing policies and thus have little incentive to govern well. East Congo State is essentially broken, with most of the land lawless and leaving locals to learn the hard way that they need the poor government they had. West Africa's cocoa and cotton agriculture industries are very poor and largely controlled by foreign demand. The mining and agriculture sectors in Africa face numerous and glaring issues, but some gradual progress has been made. It is important, as first worlders, to consider how our favorite products get to us and to understand how we can work to create a prosperous global market.